If you want to have a career in this, you have to know why you're the right person to call and why you have a skill set that's exactly right for this particular thing. And it's hard to make a living at it if they can just hire a different person and pay them less. You know, you got to have a skill set that is like, well, no, that's the guy. You got to pay him what he wants because he's the guy.
Hello, and welcome to The Other Side of the Bell, a podcast dedicated to the world of trumpet, brought to you by Bob Reeves Brass. We want to inspire you to develop joy and confidence in your trumpet playing. I'm your host, John Snell, and joining me today is trumpeter C.J. Camerieri. But first, some trumpet news. We are in the midst of summer, and boy, is it hot out here in the shop. Actually, I'm not at the shop right now. I'm getting ready to go on vacation for a few days. But it's hot here as well. It's been in the high hundreds, over 110 at the shop last week. So a lot of North America is dealing with a heat wave. So it'd be a good time to head down to Australia to our friends down under, where they're in the midst of winter as we speak. Real quick, I want to shout out and give a special thanks to Dr. Ricky Spears. I just got back from Atom Fest, and what a wonderful event it was. We sold out on alignments again, sold 3 or 4 Charlie Davis trumpets, found some good homes for those. Of course, the mutes and the guard bags and the Reeves mouthpieces. It was a wonderful event. So many great players there, young and old, professional and comeback player or just hobbyist. Met lots of great people, including a shout out to Russ. Came up on the very first opening day to say that he loves the podcast and listens every night as he's cooking. So have to come check out your cooking, Russ, at some point. And what's even cooler is his wife listens along and apparently enjoys the sound of my voice. So that was a great way to kick off Atom Fest by having Russ stop by and say hello, along with several others of you who are dedicated podcast listeners. So thank you again. And a huge thank you to Dr. Ricky Spears. They actually got us out of the vendor room. For those of you who were there, this was a rare occurrence. They did a big band concert on Saturday night after everything shut down. And they swap through. They hire the big band, and then they have a trumpet section that swaps through for all of the students and the presenters, the presenting artists at Atom Fest. And then they had a vendor trumpet section. So it was myself and Matthew Collins from the Reeves booth, Ben Strickland from the Greg Black, and Michael Capps, Mike Capps and Ben Strickland from the Greg Black booth, and Fred Powell, of course, from Con Selmer. So we made up the trumpet section, played a couple tunes in the midst of packing up our booths to head home. But it was a lot of fun to actually get the instrument out and remember why we do what we do. So huge thank you to that wonderful trumpet section, and of course to Ricky and everyone who put together Atom Fest. A couple things real quick coming up on the tour list. I will be in Japan, Tokyo, Japan, September 17th to 24th at Joy Brass, doing valve alignments and mouthpieces. And Lasse Lindgren will be coming out for that from Sweden, presenting the Olvin mutes with us. So if you're in and around Japan, we'll have more details of that coming up shortly. We'll be visiting Virtuosity Music in Boston, October 9th and 10th, Friday and Saturday. Always a great hang with Steve and Robbie and the gang there. So if you're in and around New England, October 9th and 10th. And then the following month, North Carolina will be at Greg Black Mouthpieces and the NCMEA convention, November 6th through 9th. So get those on your calendars. We will have more details as we get closer to those dates for things like valve alignment signups and things like that. Couple things real quick. I have some new horns that just came in on the consignment used side of our website. A beautiful 1947 medium bore Martin. Unfortunately, it's not the highly sought after large bore version, but the medium bore plays great, amazing condition. One owner from 1947. Have that up on the website. And I just posted a few more Boyd Hood trumpets from his collection, a couple Queen On high horns, a D trumpet, and an FG trumpet that are pretty rare, an Olds Ambassador E flat trumpet, beautiful horn, especially for a student horn. That's a really cool instrument. A Getzen Eterna D trumpet that Boyd and Charlie Schluter helped design many years ago, as well as a Olds Opera and a Con 60B. So pretty big instrument dump on the website. So if you're interested in any of those, and all of them are in just astounding condition considering their age. So you go to trumpetmouthpiece.com and check our used instrument section if you're interested in those, as well as some cool old Bach mouthpieces from Boyd's collection as well. Those will be hitting the website this week. All right, I think that's enough trumpet news. Let's get right to my interview with CJ Camerieri. Today's episode is brought to you by Bob Reeves Brass, who share your passion for creating extraordinary music. You know that feeling when your instrument just clicks and the music flows effortlessly? That's what Bob Reeves Brass has been helping customers do since 1968. We've helped brass musicians like you achieve their dreams by ensuring their equipment is always in perfect harmony. We know you want to immerse yourself in the art of music making, and we're here to remove any barriers between you and your creative vision. Bob Reeves Brass is truly your one-stop shop for everything you need to fuel your passion and create music that touches hearts and souls. So go ahead, let us help you elevate your sound to new heights. Don't wait another moment to elevate your musical journey with Bob Reeves Brass. Connect with us at bobreeves.com, shoot us an email at info@bobreeves.com, and keep up with the latest news on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter at Bob Reeves Brass. Embrace your passion for music and let Bob Reeves Brass be your partner in creating the extraordinary. CJ Camerieri is a two-time Grammy Award-winning trumpeter, composer, arranger, producer, and multi-instrumentalist whose career spans classical, pop, rock, and improvisation. A Juilliard graduate and co-founder of Y Music, he has toured and recorded with artists including Paul Simon, Bon Iver, Sufjan Stevens, Sting, and Ben Folds, while contributing to more than 300 recordings and commissioning over 100 new works featuring trumpet. His own projects include Carm and Heavy Makeup, alongside extensive work on Broadway and with ensembles including Orpheus, The Knights, and the Orchestra of St. Luke's. And now here's my interview with CJ Camerieri. Well, I am so honored to have joining me today on the other side of the bell, CJ Camerieri. CJ, how you doing?
Pretty good, John. Thanks for having me. Really excited to chat.
Yeah, we're going to talk about all kinds of things because multi-instrumentalist, you write, compose, arrange, do all kinds of things. But I want to start first with the trumpet. Well, first question is, did you start on the trumpet? Was that your first instrument?
So piano was my first instrument. My dad was middle school band director in our hometown in Millville, New Jersey. And he taught private piano lessons at the house after school each day. And I remember being 3 or 4 years old, so jealous of those kids. And I was, music obsessed, walking around singing all the time. And he also conducted our church choir. And I would instead of wanting to play with friends or whatever and do all that, I was just I want to watch the choir rehearsal, So I was super obsessed. And so he started me on piano when I was 4. And that was my whole world. And I practiced hours a day. And it was that was good. I could do it. And then being the middle school band director, when I was in 3rd grade, he needed trumpets in his band. And, I was obviously musically inclined and doing well with piano and everything. So he was and I had all my teeth, adult teeth in and all that, and wasn't going to need braces. So he was oh, you should play trumpet. So he gave me a trumpet in 3rd grade. And, I think in 4th grade, I very dramatically quit playing piano to focus on the trumpet,
Dramatically.
So silly. But I was just immediately hooked. And one summer, I think it was the summer after 4th grade or 5th grade, he said he would pay me $1 for every hour I practiced. And I was I was going to do this anyway. And so I was practicing right away, 4 or 5 hours a day. He quickly scrapped that deal. And so, I was just like most kids, it was my whole world, and I was obsessed immediately. And when I was 10 years old, if you asked me what I was going to do with my life, I'd be professional trumpet player, even though I had no concept whatsoever of what that was or meant. But
yeah, you fell instantly in love. So did you learn from your dad, or did he get you another teacher?
He got me another teacher. In most small towns, he was the middle school band director. There was a couple of different middle schools, and then the high school band director was a trumpet player. It was pretty good, and who had majored in trumpet, and and education co-majored. So he was good, and he taught me until, his name is Jim Mark, and he taught me until 8th grade. And then I studied with Roger Blackburn, the Philly Orchestra. He was kind of my classical teacher. And this guy, Rick Kerber, who passed away my senior year of high school, but he was kind of like the lead commercial player in town. And he kind of ran the whole high school jazz mafia of Philadelphia. And he heard me play when I was in, I think it was 7th grade at some, middle school jazz band competition. And wrote me a letter and was like, basically just like taught me free lessons for a long time because we didn't have a lot of extra money, and gave me a horn. And like, he was really a mentor kind of figure. Being a lot of people.
What was his name?
His name was Rick Kerber.
Kerber.
Wow. His brother, Ron Kerber, is still very active in the Philadelphia scene. Yeah. He was a trumpet teacher at the University of the Arts in Philly, and played at the, he played all lead trumpet on all the Broadway shows that came through town and all the stuff in Atlantic City. And then he was amazing. So
were you studying with both of those teachers at the same time?
Yeah.
Or wow.
Yeah. My dad was smart. I was like, I think like most kids, like jazz obsessed and trying to play high notes and do all that stuff. And he was like, I want you to like have a classical teacher. They kind of tricked me into classical music. It wasn't as fun. It wasn't as cool. And, I was into playing in the big bands and stuff like that. And we had an amazing big band that was like the tri-state area centering around Philly. So like Philly, Delaware, South Jersey. It's called the Mid-Atlantic Grammy Band. And like everybody in that band is still kicking ass and playing tons of gigs. And so that was like our big, every Sunday afternoon, we'd just get together and we'd all go out for food afterwards. And it was a big hang. And then, that was all of our favorite thing to do. And I listened back to those recordings, like Nick Marchione's playing trumpet, Mike Stever, me, Adam Blackstone, who's like, music director the last Oscar, got a couple Oscars ago, was a bass player. It's like just crusher after crusher. People like doing really well these days in that band. And so that was a real inspiring kind of club to be in.
Wow. That was in, you said in that Philly, South Jersey area. Amazing. Sure.
Yeah.
So what was it like taking lessons? Did it confuse you at all? Getting like, because there's a lot of different ways to play, and so you're getting this from one teacher and that from another.
Yeah, not really. I mean, I just wanted I just needed lots of stuff to play, and so I just was like, I was kind of just into everything, and I could see the handwriting on the wall that like practicing a Charlier is going to make you better at playing bebop, and playing characteristic studies is going to make you better at being flexible and endurance to play lead in a big band. I could see that all these things fed into each other. And I also I didn't know what I wanted to do. I went to the Boston University Tanglewood Institute for high school kids, the orchestra program, this summer before my senior year in high school. And that was the first time I ever played in an orchestra. And I fell in love with that. This is amazing, sitting and playing, all this huge repertoire. And I just kind of liked everything. And I got to play a lot at Curtis, in their orchestral concerts when I was in high school. And that was insane. It's some of my favorite orchestra moments I've ever had. And all while, I got to do that. And then the next week I was playing in the National Grammy Band, playing lead. And, I love doing everything. And I also had no idea what I wanted to do,
But you're just soaking it all in, absorbing, doing everything.
Yeah. I was obsessed. I practiced like 6 hours a day, and that was it.
Wow. So, who are your inspirations at this point?
I love Clifford Brown and Louis Armstrong and Miles Davis, and that was all I listened to. I didn't really listen to any classical music. I didn't really care about it like that. I sort of was like, I knew I was, I was well informed and well taught enough to know it was important to practice all this stuff, but it wasn't I didn't see myself ever sitting in an orchestra. I didn't see myself, playing on a brass quintet, playing the Canadian. I never saw that for myself. But I also had no idea what I wanted to do.
Yeah, you just like the trumpet. You love making.
I like the trumpet. There's more stuff to play.
Yeah. So when it got time to start applying for colleges, universities, it sounds like it was pretty clear that you wanted to play trumpet. There was no other question. You didn't, apply to be a history major or anything like that.
They asked me to go to Curtis before my senior year, after my junior year of high school. And I was all set to go. And the superintendent of the high school district was like, because, like the football program at the school was really forward facing and popular. And so the marching band was also, because it played the halftime and sat in the stands and did all that. And he was like, he wanted to keep me, and I was an ass, and I just played at the Grammys, and I'd done all this stuff that was like good for the school. And so he offered me, it sounds insane, but he was like, what will it take to keep him in high school for another year? And it was like a baseball free agent or something, so very low stake thing. And so my dad told him, well, if he can stay home and practice for we had a 7-period day. So I stayed home and practiced for the first 4 periods of the day. And then I went to school and had lunch, gym, jazz band, and English. Those are like the required courses I had to take. So they let me do that, but the stipulation was I had to be in marching band, which I like loathed. But so that was my senior year of high school. So like I was already just like a one-trick pony. Like, this is what I'm doing. I'm like,
just practicing all day.
And I really did.
High school.
Use the time effectively. Like I that's what I wanted to do.
Incredible. You'd mentioned, so you were on the Grammys? Was that with the Grammy band or?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So how did that come about?
That was all through just like the band I was telling you about before that Rick Kerber ran. They were all these regional Grammy bands. They probably still are. And yeah, you just audition for the Grammy band. So I did that my junior year. It was my first time ever on an airplane. I went to LA for 10 days and it was amazing.
Come out to LA. What was it like going to the Grammys?
It was amazing. It was the year Jennifer Lopez wore that crazy dress. I remember seeing that in person and being like, oh, yeah, it was wild and so cool.
Was there any inkling that you wanted to be in that scene at that point, or was that still too early?
Way too early. I had no idea. I was like, popular music was the furthest thing from my mind. Like, I was just a jazz nerd, who practiced trumpet, and I knew nothing of anything. I was very, very poo-pooing and elitist of all of that kind of stuff. And we listened to some Simon and Garfunkel growing up, but also like, my dad was a middle school band director. It wasn't like he was getting home and so excited to put on music and listen to more music. It's like, no, he did that all day long.
The sounds he heard in a middle school band day in and day out. So you delayed not going to Curtis, right? They wanted you and you stayed in high school because you were a hot commodity in the marching band. So then what happened?
So then I did all the usual auditions for colleges. I auditioned for, Juilliard and Curtis, Eastman, Cleveland, whatever, just the regular schools. Mm-hmm. And I took some lessons before those auditions. I had a lesson with Mark Gould. And I was really nervous for it. He taught all my favorite trumpet players, and he was the only teacher who was like, oh, you sound terrible. Like, it's like, rip me a new one. And I was like, I'm going to study with this guy, and he's also like, he had like, the great story of him is he auditioned for Horace Silver's band and the Met Opera in the same week or something like that, and got both gigs and took the Met. But like, he was interested in jazz and improvising, and I had an opportunity to study with Bilger or Mike Sachs or all these other people who were taught by him. And I was like, let me just go to the horse's mouth,
Yeah.
Also, New York was really exciting to me. And
interesting. So you got, long story short, is you got into Juilliard first try.
Yeah.
And that was your first pick because Mark said you sounded terrible.
Pretty much that's exactly how it went. But also, like, he was cool. He's like, all right, like, gave me a hard time, and then was like, he didn't charge me for my lessons in high school. I didn't have to come from a lot of money, and it felt like the obviously right thing to do. So I studied with him all 4 years that I was there, and, our lessons, because I had practiced so much in high school, like I had played everything pretty much. And our lessons were going for walks, talking about the music industry, listening to records, playing chess, and then if I was having the playing thing that I was working on, we would do that. But like, it was probably more unorthodox than most. And it was I had to write music, write songs. So it was a little like out of the box, and he was just so great at knowing what I needed to do. I didn't need to prepare an etude and play it for him every week or like learn the solo. Like I'd done all of that in high school, and, we played a lot of duets, and already he was like, you need to become like more than just a trumpet nerd and be a person who like, but I had to read a book every week for him, for my lessons, trying to shape me into like a guy that can also function at a dinner party and talk about more than just trumpet,
What
which I was,
valve oil to use? Yeah.
which I was not capable of doing when I first moved to New York,
Heavy valve caps and valve oils. He breaks the ice at parties.
Yeah.
So it sounds like by the time you got to university, you like chop wise, pedagogically speaking, you were pretty set up.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And you had played the literature during your high school, your mornings, your senior year, but you were playing in the orchestras. Were you doing chamber music as well at Juilliard?
I think I was like the only kid who did the American Brass Band seminar every semester. Like it was every 8 semesters. I did it every single one. I love playing chamber music and learned so much from that. And Ray Mays and I were really close, and even though I didn't study with him, he would always he was really a mentor figure to me and really encouraged me, and ended up coaching my brass quintet more often than not, and yeah, I fell in love with doing chamber music. I loved playing in the orchestra. I was just tortured. Like most of Gould quit his job at the Met during my 3rd year in school, and it was just another example of another guy in an orchestra who didn't love his job, or grew to not love his job. And that was more and more often the case, at least with the people that I was around. And I looked at somebody like Ray, who had, just kind of had a freelance chamber type career, and he did love his job, and so I took that as a bit of a I was just sort of making notes on what is life as a trumpet player like, and what do I actually want to do.
And that's an interesting discussion that, I think a lot of us either didn't have or we found out the hard way, meaning,
right.
We grew up wanting to be principal trumpet of the Chicago Symphony or New York or wherever, and we don't actually understand or what the job entails and the dynamics and, maybe the politics involved, or the fact that you're sitting next to the same people.
You sit next to somebody you hate for the next 30 years of your life, and you hate going to work. And that was so often the case with everybody I met, and it's oh, pick my colleagues, Yeah,
a little bit of that discovery. And granted, there are people that have played successful careers in the orchestra and loved every minute of it, not to deter anyone listening, but
the original process was so stupid. It is so stupid, and nothing to do with music, and divorced from the actual reality of how to do the job. And I was just I don't want to do this,
Not your cup of tea. I'm curious. It seemed like your passion was more on the jazz side of things. Is there a reason why you chose a classical major as opposed to jazz?
And I was conflicted. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew jazz was more fun to me, but also when I got to play in an orchestra, it was insanely fun, and I love playing in brass quintet and doing chamber music. I really love the new music. I had no idea what I wanted to do. Juilliard didn't have a jazz program when I entered in 2000. They got it while I was there.
Mm-hmm.
I just went to Juilliard because of Gould. I just picked a teacher, and that seemed like the most important thing to pick rather than a program or, and I think it was the right move. It was great for me. It wasn't for a purpose of what a specific type of career, which I think it is more now. I think that 12 out of 12 trumpet players at Juilliard right now want to be Chris Martin, that's their goal. And it was not that when I was there. Everybody was interested in different stuff, and it was a more varied group of musicians. I think COVID and led to a lot of career anxiety for people, and the job in an orchestra looks more and more stable. I also think COVID led to a lot of people retiring and a lot of job openings. So it's kind of false sense of there are all these jobs, everyone can win a job, and that's not going to be the case in 5 years. Those jobs were filled for the next 25 years. But it was a much different kind of scene when I was there. I think it's gotten a lot more conservative over time.
Now, were you starting to freelance it? You moved to New York City. There's a lot of things going on there.
Yeah, my initial goal was make a living blowing into a trumpet,
Mm-hmm.
And so, I started doing some jingles, started doing some, actual budget recording stuff. I was subbing on a million Broadway shows, but I was always looking for what do I actually like? What do I want to do? And so I started a group right out of college. It was the new New York trumpet ensemble. So I started, when you listen to jazz, you start getting, you follow the progression and you get to some pretty out free music and Ornette Coleman and all, just follow the kind of the trajectory of history without going back. And it gets pretty avant-garde. And I followed that train and got So we started like the new New York Trumpet Ensemble, which was Mark Gould, me, Peter Evans, a bass player named Moppet Elliott, and Dave Taylor playing bass trombone. And we started doing just like, the outest gigs you've ever heard, no game plan, walking in, just totally free improv. And it was super duper fun. And for a minute I was like, oh, maybe this is more what I want to do. But then, I was with Peter, who, this is what this guy does. Like, he does this thing for real. And I was faking it. My heart was in it, but it wasn't he was devoted to this and he was the real deal. And I was like interested in things that were interesting, but I wasn't like, my heart and soul was in this. So I'm just kind of like freelancing and working and looking for the next opportunity. I also was like very aware of what I didn't learn at Juilliard. And part of that was harmony and arranging and being able to write. And so I started taking private, like right out of school, started taking private harmony lessons and arranging lessons. And that was super duper valuable. It was this guy named Paul Caputo who lived in the South Street Seaport. And I had a lesson once a week I was paying for with my Broadway freelance money. And I didn't even know why I was doing it. But it was like, okay, like this is the part of my musician. I don't hear harmony. I'm hearing single line, think they have perfect pitch. So I hear that the chord is going from GBD to CEG, but I'm not hearing that it's 5-1. I was like, there were like weird holes in my musicianship that I was keenly aware of. But so like, I'm kind of searching for what I want to do with my life. And we were driving up to Buffalo, New York to do a New York Trumpet Ensemble gig. And Peter Evans put on Sufjan Stevens' Come On, Feel the Illinois. And I immediately was like, that's what I want to do. And there, it was like totally fresh sounds, all these orchestra instruments. The arrangements were fascinating. The songwriting was incredible. And half the songs had like, verse, chorus. Trumpet's going to play the melody from the verse solo. Double chorus song is over, And so the trumpet was featured in all these ways that were like, cool, like playing these interesting melodies. And, they weren't played particularly well on the record, but it was like so charming and really lovely. And I was immediately like, that's what I want to do. Let's do more of stuff like this. So I kind of like, I got back from this gig in Buffalo and I was like, I got to start going to like Tonic in the living room and all these clubs in the Lower East Side and checking out the scene, getting involved with this in any way I can, with the goal being Sufjan Stevens. And so basically I just started going out every night to see music, and I became friends with a few people in Sufjan's band and was like, just so you know, I really love to play with him sometime. But he had a band and he had a trumpet player. And there was this like, this is like 2005-ish, 2005, 6. And the scene in Brooklyn and the Lower East Side was so incredible. And it was filled with all these bands like the National and the Dirty Projectors. And Sufjan especially was like kind of the center of it, and Anthony and the Johnsons and all these bands that were using orchestral instruments, and really featuring them and really being smart about arrangements and how to craft things. And I had just graduated with Juilliard with all these skills, and I was like, put me in, coach. So I finally got a gig with Sufjan. I'm going to say 8 or 9 months after I was introduced to his music. We played at Lincoln Center. I was playing second trumpet to his trumpet player at the time, who was totally awesome and played great, but he wasn't a professional. He like was a art restorer or something, and was the best trumpet player Sufjan knew in high school. And they were friends, Yeah. And so I just pulled Sufjan aside after that gig and I was like, hey, I love doing this. I want to do this like anytime you want. Also, I just graduated from Juilliard, and every one of my friends would love to be in your band and play with you. And he was like, no, that's not true. And I was like, yes, I swear to God, it's true. And so we kind of like did a little bit of a takeover of his band with, like-minded people. We've all seen like pop gigs where like the orchestra or the classical musicians on stage like think the music's beneath them, don't take it seriously, like just a gig, it's gonna play these whole notes. Like, I love this stuff, and I wanted to treat this music like it's Bach, with the seriousness, with like the intent, with the ear for arrangement and orchestration, and like really take this seriously, treat this like all the other music that was a big part of my life up until that point. But I was immediately like, this is if I can do this for a living, I would love to do that. So it immediately started touring with Sufjan, and that was probably like a year of like pretty big tours. Went to Japan, went all over the world. I got back from that, and I immediately got a job with Rufus Wainwright. So I toured with Rufus for a whole year. And those are both, awesome. I got to figure out what it was to tour on a tour bus. I'd never done that before. Got, play a gig every night. I learned how to be a good touring citizen, and yeah, it was thrilling. So I got home from the Rufus tour. I wanted to be in town a little more. And I remember there was a very like seminal gig. We played with the National, a few of us at the BAM Opera House. And I looked around the stage, and they had all these orchestral instruments on stage. And half the people on stage didn't want to be there, treating it just like a gig. And half the people were like, this is what I do for my life. This is what I love to do. And so I started Y Music as a result of that. And I was like, let's just get a group of, violin, viola, cello, clarinet player who plays saxophone, flute player who can sing, me on trumpet. So we'll have like horns represented, woodwinds represented, strings represented. Everybody in the group can improvise. Everybody in the group can arrange. If you need instruments for your band or solo, or your band or your record or whatever, hire us. We've got it all covered. We all freaking love it.
You love what you do. Yeah.
Love what we do. So that was the idea of starting Y Music, and I was like, there's plenty of contemporary classical new music groups in town. We don't want to do that. We want to carve out this niche for ourselves. So that's what we did. We started spreading the word. We got this group, and immediately all these songwriters and stuff that we had worked with were like, I want to write a piece of classical music for you. And we're like, no, that's not what we want to do. We want to play but immediately we got pieces. We got like the first piece we ever got was by Gabriel Kahane. And then we got a piece by Sun Lux and Judd Griedstein, and Annie Clark from St. Vincent wrote us a piece of concert music. My Brightest Diamond, Sharon Nova wrote us a piece. Sufjan wrote us a piece. So we got all these like pieces of classical music. And those people just kind of trusted us that we would like play it great and work with them on it. And Annie sent her piece and a bunch of Logic files, and we just kind of figured out what she meant with it. And so, yeah, so Y Music we're approaching our 20th year.
Jeez.
And, made a whole bunch of records and play a lot of concerts, and it's been a great ride. But what was interesting about that was we started to play with bands and songwriters. We immediately got all these pieces of concert music. So we put out records of concert music, and then the bands and songwriters heard those records of pieces and were like, oh, you guys would be great to tour as a band with. But they came to it from listening to the concert music rather than like, just the practicality of how we started it.
Yeah. So the intention wasn't to be like a horn section or a side project for an artist. You guys were your own group and playing pieces. And that all stemmed from being on stage with a bunch of other board musicians that you said you don't want to do this.
Yeah, it was like, the philosophy was play the popular music like it's Bach, but play our classical music like it's pop music. Like play it like we like it. Play it in a way that like has some energy and emotion and like passion, and move around when we play. And also I think that one of the cool parts of Y Music is, because of the instrumentation, there was no music that existed for that ensemble when we started it. So we had to create a repertoire. We've commissioned hundreds of pieces, and it's been, we're all really, really proud of it.
And I said, you were taking theory and composition lessons. Were you starting to write for the group as well?
That happened a lot later, the writing.
Okay, so this was all people writing for you, and
yeah. I think one thing Juilliard imparted on me that was really negative and was like, there are capital C composers and there are performers. And performer job is interpret, composer's job is to write music. Never the two shall meet. And so the idea of like sitting down and writing a piece was like so foreign to me. Nobody I knew did it who was playing music. Like jazz musicians do, they like write a little tune and then they immediately forget about it and improvise for 20 minutes and maybe play it again at the end. But like the idea of being like a capital C composer collaborator was something that happened much later in life. And that was actually Paul Simon, but that's kind of another story.
Yeah, we'll get into that. So I'm curious. Yeah, so the Y Music were other members of the group contributing, or was it strictly getting commissions and having other people write for you?
Strictly that. We did some arrangements if an artist wanted to work with us. Rob, our violinist, is a great string arranger. I do some arranging as well. And so we would craft arrangements for those little projects for the group. But no, it was like we play pieces by peer composers. And the other thing, philosophy we had was like, you start a new music group, you want to commission John Adams or Philip Glass or whatever. And we were like, no, we have all these talented friends. Like, let's just keep them as our main. So Andrew Norman wrote a piece in 2009 for like $2,000, and nobody knew who Andrew Norman was. And we played that piece hundreds of times. And it's like, now he's one of the biggest composers in the world. And same with Gabriella Smith. She wrote a piece right when she got out of college, and now she writes for, just had a bunch of music with the LA Phil. And our peers, it's like a rising tide lifts all boats kind of thing. And it's like, it was really cool to see like, oh, now there's a composer she can't really afford the commission, but they'll always do it for us. It was amazing to see your friends, everybody lift each other up,
Yeah. Oh, incredible. So, and at the same time, were you doing that full time, or was that a thing where you were also, did you get, when you were back in New York off the road, were you still doing?
It's always been kind of, 6 to 20 weeks a year, 20 if we were like doing touring cycles with other artists, but like it's always occupying this kind of like 7 to 12 week maybe ish kind of part of our life where it's our favorite thing to do. We're so excited to see each other. We never get sick of each other. And we all go out and do different gigs, and have different experiences and bring those back into the group and bring those songwriters or composers or, just sort of musical experiences back into the group. And it feeds itself and keeps everything fresh and all that. So we never really wanted to be a full-time group because we were all interested in tons of different things,
Doing other things. Interesting. So, so you find yourself in New York. Were you still doing Broadway and?
Still doing a little Broadway. Yeah, I had always kind of had a chair on Broadway, and everybody was always cool with me touring. And I figured out like a loophole where, if you have a chair on Broadway, you have to play 50% of the shows to keep your chair. But if you take a leave of absence, the time you miss for shouldn't be telling everybody this, but the time you miss for a leave of absence counts as a show played. So my percentages were always super way lower than 50% because they took all these leaves of absence for tours. But when you looked at the numbers and the producers looked at the numbers, it looked like I had played 60% of the shows. So nobody complained. They complained a little bit, but I was like, all right, well, I'll quit, But yeah, it was so nice, as a trumpet player, you got to log time behind the mouthpiece anyway. And so I loved having a Broadway show when I wasn't on the road because it's just logging those, getting paid to spend those hours behind the mouthpiece anyway.
Yeah. Keep the chops up. And any shows favorites to play, or any of them that you dread having to ever play again?
Or there's a great, what's the trumpet player? I'm not going to remember who's, so bad. I'm not going to remember whose quote this was, but he said after 10 shows, it's all hello, Dolly, and or after 8 shows, it's all hello, Dolly. Anything you do every single night over and over and over and over again, you just kind of, it becomes just a little bit rote. But I had a chair on Matilda, the musical, for its whole run. And that was awesome. These are the most talented kids in the world on stage, and the orchestrations were beautiful, and it was fun, But, it was always, for me, a job. I never gave up. I never turned anything down for Broadway, and I never, they would let me miss lock-ins and do all that kind of stuff. And I just felt really fortunate to have that as a when I'm home kind of thing,
You got the regular gig, but it sounded like you preferred to be out on the road or doing the independent stuff.
Yeah, 100%. But I always appreciated it, and I never dreaded it.
What were some of the tours that you would do? Was with Y Music, or was this?
So after I finished touring with Rufus, I did some touring with the National, and around that time I was really, really into this idea of, working in alternative popular music, and Y Music was cooking a little bit. And I was like, how do I become more valuable to a band or a songwriter rather than just somebody? Because, just somebody that can play a trumpet part in an indie rock or a pop band, there's not that many gigs for that. And if you have the skill set just for that, the money is not going to be super duper great, because I saw that I wanted to make gigs that only I could do, So I started taking piano lessons. I bought a bunch of synthesizers, learned how they worked. And around this time, there was a French classical trumpet player who I heard about who picked up the French horn. And 9 months later, won principal horn of the French ballet, or, the French opera, or so, something like that. Tell me the story. And I was like, French horn, if I could play French horn too for all these bands, now all of a sudden, because, in the context of a songwriter, when you play the trumpet on stage, people look at you. Mm-hmm. And when you're trying to serve a song and a song's message, you're supposed to be paying attention to the singer, and you can play the trumpet around someone's voice and do that, but it's limiting. And I had gotten lucky with Sufjan and Rufus and the National and these kind of things where it's that was enough. So I just kind of secretly taught myself how to play French horn for 6 to 9 months. And then way before I was ready to do gigs, told people that I could do it, and had some really embarrassing first, attempts. And eventually kind of figured it out. I was usually arranging my own horn parts. So I wrote things that I could play, and I practiced it more than I did the trumpet. And I was just like, this is going to be a key because you can play the French horn through the chorus, pads in the chorus of a song, little couple of arrangement moments in a verse, and then pick up the trumpet and play on the outro, make it feel exciting. That formula could work, in a band. And the funny thing about the French horn too is there are amazing French horn players in the world, but everybody thinks of the French horn as super hard. It's the hardest instrument. I don't think it's true. But when you make a mistake on the French horn, people go, oh, well, it is so hard. I was at the Philharmonic and I heard somebody do the same thing, and then when you do it right, they're like, oh my God, that's amazing. Well, that's supposed to be really hard. So the bar is for the uninformed, they're like, oh, well, sure, you cracked a couple of notes, but that's what happens,
It's French horn, yeah.
So the instrument lends itself to kind of a, not as high bar as it could.
Crack a note on the trumpet. Oh man, that's a terrible trumpet player.
Exactly. French horn. So, well, it is hard, So yeah, so I saw that as this could be really, really cool for me. So I immediately started playing gigs on French horn and just basically getting hired to be as a trumpet player for a gig and bringing my French horn along. And 9 times out of 10, people are like, oh my God, you have French horn. That would be great. And working that in. And then, so it was probably 2008, I started playing that. In 2010, Y Music played a festival in Cincinnati called Music Now that was run by the Aaron and Bryce Dessner, who were in the band The National. And Bryce is a big composer and film scorer. And Aaron's now the biggest producer in the world, produces Taylor Swift and, all this huge stuff. And they had this festival and we were playing a Y Music set Friday night, and then Saturday night, Justin Vernon from Bon Iver was playing a set, not as Bon Iver, just as a solo set. And he saw our Y Music concert and was like, holy shit, I love this stuff. He had a Philip Glass tattoo on his arm and was just so into what we were doing. He was like, can you guys stay and sit in with me on my set? And not everybody could, but I was such a huge fan of the first Bon Iver record. And I was like, hell yeah, I'm staying. And so, I subbed out of my Broadway show and home and stayed and played this unforgettable night music with Justin. And after that, we had a big hang that night. And he was like, you guys got to come out and check out my studio in Wisconsin. And we'll hang and, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, sure. We're hitting it off as friends and all that. And then, a week. So he bought us tickets that night to go and hang out, or we made plans that night. And then, the night before we went there, he was like, oh, and I'm working on a new record. So bring all your instruments and we're going to work the whole time. And I was like, oh shit. Okay, great. I mean, I kind of knew that was going to be the case anyway, but so we came out there and he played us the bones of, it was me, Rob, from Y Music, Colin Stetson, who's a bass sax player, Mike Lewis, who's a tenor player. We were all there, and he played us the bones of what would become the second Bon Iver record, just without all the arrangements and stuff on them. And it was just I just remember hearing it being this is going to change music. This is the most unbelievable record I've ever heard. So so we worked on that for 2 weeks and wrote all the arrangements and did all the tracking. And then he asked a few of us to join the band and made us equal partners in the band. And it was just an unbelievable thing. I think our first gigs we played were at the Pabst Theater in Milwaukee. It holds 800 people. And a year and a half later, we had run 2 Grammys, played on SNL, played on all the TV shows, and we're playing arenas all over the world. So it was just like crazy to be a part of that kind of arc that I'd heard about, but I'd never been on the ground floor of. And so
it had to have been surreal to be.
It was incredible, but it was, it was also really obvious. Like we heard that music and we were like, this is unbelievable. Like, of course, like this is, you just knew it was undeniable, and it came out and just it was undeniable. And it was just like forever grateful for that experience. And, won Best New Artist, Best Alternative Album with the Grammys, and, just to watch it build and also be like, I think like, I really love this too. It's not like you're a part of some pop band. You're like, oh, it's you, but like, I was like, no, this is, and it had all of our personalities in it, all the people that worked on it. And, so it was a transformative thing for me. And then that tour ended, and a month later, Paul Simon called me or his, manager called me and said, Paul wants to have lunch with you tomorrow. And I was like, Paul, who, and you're like, Simon. I was like, oh, okay. And he had been following wine music and Bon Iver and was really, he's like best friends with Philip Glass and had been checking out what we were doing. And then, just sort of knew his son had seen wine music open for the Dirty Projectors at Carnegie Hall and like bought our records and gave them to his dad. And like, so Paul was like, the most interesting music happening right now is all this contemporary classical stuff. It's my favorite thing. He was really into Harry Parch and all this, stuff that you wouldn't suspect. So yeah, we had a 4-hour lunch at the Brill Building, and he played me records and I played him stuff, and never saw me play a note on an instrument, and asked me to join his band. And yeah, I did that for 10 years. And he started coming to wine music concerts and asking, like figuring. And so then he did a gig with just him not playing guitar, but him just singing with wine music backing him up. And then he added wine music to the touring band for his farewell tour, and got to make tons of records together. And,
that's amazing. And all based on passion, it's being authentic, all these cliche business words these days or whatever you want to call it, but it's absolutely true. Your authentic self, the stuff you're passionate about is what led to your success.
Yeah. I think that like, I teach a little bit at Cal Arts. I just started. And the one thing I try to like impress them is like, what's the most important thing for a musician? Like there's so many trumpet operators, right? There's so many brass players who can like operate the instrument, and any instrument at that case. And like, the only thing that matters is like, what is your taste? Like, what do you like? And that can be an unbelievable amount of things, but you have to be like so strong that like, when you're going to work with me or, or all these different people, like, what's the taste level going to be? What is the, and I think that's what's drawn me now into like producing and songwriting and all of that. It's just being like, I know what I like. I know what I think is good. I don't think I'm right about it, but I know what I like. And yeah, there are a lot of people that can do a lot of gigs. Like I've tried to make it so that like, if I'm playing like a bunch of keyboard parts, piccolo trumpet solo on the boxer, and then a bunch of French horn pads during the chorus of the song, there's not a lot of people who can do those things, but, taste is like the most important part of anything you're doing,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I, look back at your explanation of, why you picked up the French horn. I mean, it was 2 things. One, you were thinking of what value you could add to whatever artist or group or band, which a lot of us don't think about when we're doing our Clark studies. Our value is I can play this faster, or I can play this higher, or, I can play this more musically, but it's not, that level. And also the musical application of, like you're explaining, behind the singer, like the French horn would sound so much better compared to a trumpet, which is going to get in the way. Like all of that stuff was going into your decision just to pick up a new instrument. It's brilliant.
Yeah. I mean, like, I'd say I think of it as like a toolbox, like what do you got in your toolbox when you show up for work? And having trumpet, piccolo trumpet, flugelhorn, tons of mutes, and French horn and ones and mutes. That's a lot of, like, that is usually enough when people hire me for horns on their record. Like most of my life right now is, or most of my like horn playing life right now is going to a studio and there's a record someone's working on and we want horns on it. And that's the extent of the like idea. And, you know, I show up with enough things in my toolkit that you want it to sound like classical music, boom, there. You want it to sound like, you know, horn hits on a rock record or, you know, a soul record, boom, I can do that. You want it to be sort of like an indie rock trumpet hero moment, I can do that. Like, you know, just being the obvious person to call for that situation, you know, it's always been kind of my goal.
Making yourself indispensable.
If you're indispensable, you can get paid. If you're indispensable, you can get, you know, like, you know, I've done some big Hollywood scores where I come in with all my horns and I'm playing French horn and trumpet, and you watch the people running this session like kind of freak out because they're like, this is going to cost a ton of money and double it, all this kind of stuff. And it's like, less than another body, you know.
Being aware of that. I have to go back. What was it like going to the Grammys a second time, and this time, you know, instead of the Grammy band, but you didn't get.
So we were asked to play, but it was like a stupid pairing with somebody else, and we turned it down. But I remember watching on TV and thinking, "There's no way we're gonna win." And yeah, dude, he won, and he walked up on stage and accepted it, and it was like, "Oh my God, that's not." Change everything for the band, and it really did, you know.
So you didn't get to actually physically be there and relive being there with the Grammy band versus then now being there as an artist, but you still won the award nonetheless.
I got a couple trophies, you know.
Yeah, but it was kind of a shift with you guys, because then it opened the door to artists later on. Yeah. You know, that I guess an acceptance by whatever the Grammys is, you know, however you want to label that.
Totally.
You know,
yeah,
it's 100%. Cool to do things differently. So, you know, I want to talk a little bit, a couple things. One, like when you were learning to play the French horn and the doubling, did it mess with your chops at all? Did you have any?
It did. At first, I tried to like, you know, let me get a mouthpiece that's similar, blah, blah, blah. And then I eventually just had to be like, you know what? It's a totally different instrument. I'm just going to treat it like a totally different instrument. You know, the funny thing with French horn is like, you know, people get mad at me for saying this, but like a trumpet's a trumpet, right? Like you can give me a middle school brand trumpet and I can make it sound good, you know, and you can give me a custom $10. There's not a lot of like engineering on the trumpet, right?
Yeah.
I played a pretty good French horn for a while and I sounded pretty good. And then I went to the Alexander factory in Germany and got, you know, a French horn that cost 4 times what my other French horn cost. And I sounded 4 times as good, you know, the like engineering of these instruments, there's just a lot more stuff to do. And so like getting a really quality instrument that was really special really helped more than I think. I should have done it sooner, but I didn't think it would really matter because the trumpet's a trumpet, you know, kind of. But this, you know, and I'm also like a boring trumpet player. I play a Bach 37. I play the same 3C mouthpiece I played for the last, you know, million years, you know. So I'm not like I was never like a big equipment guy. But then with French horn, I was like, oh, this super duper matters. This is like a lot more to do here. Yeah, I mean, with French horn, you know, the main difference, you know, left hand and register and all that kind of stuff. It's just like remembering it's twice as long. So you got to blow longer, whatever that, you know, abstractly means. And the French horn, playing French horn has made my trumpet playing so much better, you know, because you're blowing longer. It's just like, you know, you're using your air in such a different way and it feels good the way it vibrates. There's not the resistance. I pick up a trumpet and it feels like a toy. Vice versa. If I'm playing a ton of trumpet, my French horn playing suffers, but like, that's fine, you know, for what I'm asked to do.
So the different embouchures and different mouthpieces, you practice switching kind of thing, and that just got used to it.
Yeah, and it just like, as soon as I decided to make it a different thing, then it was just fine.
Yeah. So touring, anything you had to learn on the different on your tours that you didn't learn in Juilliard? Things you had to learn on the road?
Every experience is different. You know, you learn what you need to practice on your off days, how often, you know, from tour, because you're playing really hard on the nights when you have shows, and what do you do when you have 2 days off? And, you know, like, you know, so like just figuring out the practicalities of how to do your job day in, day out without bothering all your neighbors in the hotel room and all that. The tour with Paul Simon was incredible, but we did a 2.5 to 3 hour sound check / rehearsal every day. That from like, 4 to 7. And then we had an 8 o'clock show where we played a 2.5 hour show with like 28 tunes in it. And those rehearsals each day were called sound checks, but they weren't. He was rearranging things. So you have all this music memorized and all these intricate parts. And then each show you had 3 or 4 really teeny tiny details. Okay, we're taking out this note the first time we play this figure and then adding it in when it comes back around the later thing. Okay, you got to remember all that. And if you didn't, like, he would never get mad, but he was disappointed. Like, we just spent all this time working on these really, really intricate parts. And that was his love. We always joke we could do a tour of just rehearsing. He would do it, but it wouldn't pay. Like, that's what he loved. He loves tinkering and getting it just right. And that was a big challenge, learning how to like force your muscle memory. And all of a sudden you're in front of 20,000 people and he's listening to make sure instead of playing, you go, that subtle difference means the world to him. He's trying this out, and a couple of early on where I forgot one of the changes we had made because I practiced this other way of doing it so much, and so like learning like, no, that's what's important to this guy, like refining things and making it a little bit better. And like, that's his joy on tour. And my job is to make him happy on tour.
Yeah.
Like learn to do that with him and also just like learning the attention to detail. And he has this thing, the ear goes to the irritant, and so if something pokes out or something, it's like, that's not right. Let's work on that. And now that I do more producing and stuff, that's where I think about that, almost every day. The ear goes to the irritant. What on this is bothering me? That sound, that, shaker, that tambourine or whatever. And
you said you were on the road, what 10 years with him? 8 years? Something
yeah,
like that?
yeah.
Was that full time? Like, where'd he go on and off?
It was pretty busy. He would always do like long stretches, like an 8-week US run, 8-week, 6-week Europe run. But it was pretty regular. It was regular enough.
And then were you still based in New York during all of that? Okay. Yeah. And then were you trying to pick up gigs as well on the off dates, or did that?
I always had a Broadway show. Wine Music was doing stuff that kind of like 7 to 12-ish kind of weeks a year. So that fit into there. And so it was busy, between touring with Paul, the Wine Music weeks, when we would do Wine Music, we did a big collaboration with Ben Folds, where we were his band for a year. We did the same thing with Jose Gonzalez and Tallest Man on Earth, all these different, so we would have stretches where we'd be busier and we'd have a 4 or 5 week tour with somebody. And I was starting to play on more records, but like I was busy at a touring gig, a Broadway show, and like my passion project, chamber music group. And so like I had a gig every night or, 10 gigs a week.
So even when you're not on tour, there's stuff waiting for you when you get home. Amazing.
Totally. Yeah. And then COVID happened. And I have 2 kids. I had 2 kids and I realized I wanted to be around more. I sort of realized that like, as awesome as all the touring and all that was, there was no back end, you get paid to do your job and then you go home and then you wait for the next job to come up. I didn't want to be playing a Broadway show and missing bedtime every night. And I was starting to do more and more recording. And, I sort of looked around New York and was like, where'd everybody go? Oh, everybody went to LA. And so moved to LA 4.5 years ago. Mm-hmm. And love it like crazy and having the best time. And,
the winters are better for sure.
Everything's better. Don't tell anybody.
Wow. Don't give the secrets away, but
no, I love it. I wake up every day. I'm so happy to be here. The music scene here right now is what the music scene was in New York for me 15, 18 years ago. Where, it's just the best players are here. The quantity of music being made in LA right now is staggering. The amount of like recording sessions there are, the amount of people come here to make records. It's like, I think that the kind of like more institutional, union-y, jingle, movie score, all that kind of stuff. I think that that's not doing quite as well right now. Mm-hmm. But the band coming to make a record in LA it's insane how much music there is right here. And so much of it is really, really great, really inspiring. And I'm kind of blown away by the LA scene right now. So many recording studios, so many producers making great stuff.
That's encouraging. Any projects you're working on right now that you can share, or are they all
Yeah.
under NDAs?
No, there's yeah, a record I just worked on by this artist Ryan Beatty just came out. I'm really proud of that. It's gorgeous songs. Ethan Greska produced it, and it's really incredible. I worked a lot on the new Phoebe Bridgers record, which is going to come out pretty soon. And then sort of one of my main projects I've been doing is Susanna Hoffs, who is the lead singer of the Bangles. I was introduced to her a couple of years ago, and we've made 3 records. We're starting on a 4th, where I'm producing, co-writing with her, an amazing band. We're gonna start releasing music this summer, and the full record's gonna come out in September. And we're gonna do a tour. We're gonna open for Billy Idol. And so I'm her like producer, co-writer, music director person. So we're gonna do some touring, and we're gonna do a residence at the Carlisle Hotel in New York, which I've never done, but I'm really excited about it. Yeah. She's incredible. Like, she's 67 years old and sounds like she's in her 20s, and like always took great care of her voice and just sounds incredible, and is one of the greatest people to work with. And so she's been keeping me busy, and we just started writing songs for a new project of hers. And I'm working on a musical with Edie Brickell and a few other people, and Trevor Hagen, who's another trumpet player, producer-y type person. And so we're working on this musical. Might be another musical in the works. So it's just busy.
Still get time to play trumpet?
Yeah. It's funny. It goes in waves. Like, I was in North Carolina for 2 weeks working on this musical workshop, and I didn't play at all, and it's been an interesting journey to be like, what's my musical worth without this instrument, and I think going back to like the taste thing and all of that, but it's like, if I'm playing trumpet, I know I belong in any kind of situation. But when you like divorce yourself from that kind of like crutch or like shield artistically, you go like, oh wait, what can I add to this as a not, with taking away the thing that I do best. And it's been an interesting journey to realize that and realize what you're worth without this other thing. And then it's been like, so take 2 weeks off. Now I got a session 4 days, so get back into it and back to the hours a day. And, it's been fun. It's fun going back and forth.
Curious, what does that look like for you? Do you have a routine, or do you have a, get back in shape kind of thing? Or
yeah, I mean, I kind of like, I don't really believe in routines. I think that like, there are things you have to play and ways of playing, work on articulation and low notes and high notes and doing all of that kind of stuff. I think that like, I've found people with really, really set routines get really good at doing their routine. and it's divorced from like your actual job of playing music. And so like, I have a no music stand, no looking at music rule, never play the same exercise one day to the next, but I'm playing kind of the same stuff. I'm just trying to always do it like from a point of like imagination, not a point of muscle memory, and just like kind of rote stuff, but I'm doing all the things you would do in a routine, but not thinking of it as a routine, thinking of it as like, playing different modes of a scale, or doing it in fourths, but I did it in fifths yesterday, so I'm gonna do it in, thirds today, and changing it up in that way. So you're kind of always occupying a different part of your brain. You're keeping it in the creative side, not in the
keep yourself from going in autopilot and
and keeping yourself in tune with what you're actually doing and how it feels, and what again, like not you can play your routine because you're good at playing your routine, and you're not paying attention to how all the things are actually feeling and working. And you don't need to over warm up. You don't need to like, whenever I play a gig with like a young kid or whatever, is like in college, out of college, I'm always just like, I think it's just hilarious. They show up tired because they just did their 45-minute routine before the gig. You're like, dude, but this is the gig. Like, whatever Ray May said to me one time about like warming up, he's like, 2 minutes in, you're practicing, like, right. Yeah. Okay. So let's just like figure out and be as efficient as possible, so you're as fresh as possible for the day, but it's an important difference to me. You're always doing something in a different key, that you're just not, thinking of it as a routine,
Yeah. And one thing, just switch to the kind of the business side of things, because you said something earlier about, if you're playing in a Broadway show, or if you're the trumpet player, you get paid once for your time, versus the back end. Can you describe that a little bit more, and like in some of the choices you've made career wise?
Sure. I mean, when you write a song, right? I'm not a prolific enough songwriter to be paid ahead of time for my time. So you write a song. I've done this countless times in LA. You're just going there and working for nothing, right? But, when I write a song with Trevor and Edie for a musical, we each own a third of that song. And I always kind of treat that as like a lottery ticket, or when I produce a record, like I'm producing this record for Sue that's going to come out, I have a percentage of the master that I own because I produced it. And so when a song gets licensed or it goes here, there, or whatever, I get a percentage of that money on the back end. And so just having skin in the game in that way, which is like, I just wrote a song with Mike D of the Beastie Boys that's coming out, I think, like quite soon. And, if that song does really well and gets in these ads or streams really well and does something that like my grandkids are going to be seeing money from that, and that just became important to me because I realized I hadn't had that. When you write a song, you put it out, you make a record, you've got skin in the game from the back end, and that you can't count on that. Like I always treat it as like, I always try to have like 4 or 5 lottery tickets out there at any point. And then I'm going to studios and playing gigs.
Mm-hmm. So there's some front end work, but combining that with back end. And yeah, that's the thing. A lot of us, like, again, we didn't, or at least I wasn't taught that in music school, that,
Neither. You're taught you go off, you play and you get paid. And, that was kind of like the New York scene, like, show up where you're supposed to, you do a good job, you get between $50 and $2,500 and you go home, you pay your bills. And the thing in LA is, hey man, do you want to come over? We're like working on this idea and blah, blah, blah. And you show up with all your stuff and you do the same amount of work with the same intensity and you leave with an understanding that, everybody in the room is going to share in the back end of that creation. And that's not sustainable if you don't, have family money or have the sort of day job as brass player or musician. So it's important to have both to me at all times.
Yeah. But I think a lot of us only know, hey, I'm getting paid for this gig. And if you get sick or God forbid you have a chop injury or something and you can't work for a week or 2 months.
Or there's a pandemic.
Yeah.
The pandemic woke me up to that. Actually had a big Paul Simon tour canceled and a whole bunch of other stuff. And I was like, oh, if I'm not working, I'm not making money, And all the people I know who work in this other side of the business, like at a certain point, that creative labor that you've put in continues to profit, if you're so lucky. But it just became important to me to like see that. And I also like love songwriting and I love new challenges and I love writing music and I love producing for people and encouraging them to be the best that they can be. And, taking the experiences I've had from Sufjan to Paul and putting it onto these other, like a younger artist. And
absolutely amazing. Can't wait to see what else you have in your future in terms of your projects and some of the ones that you've already shared with us. How can folks find out? Speaking of projects, what's the best way to find out what's going on with you? Social media, website?
Or Instagram. It's called Carm. I have a solo project called Carm, CARM. My first name is Carmen, so it's just CARM is what I was known as, and Bon Iver was my nickname of the band. And so Carm_band is my little handle for that, which I'm pretty good about talking about stuff that's coming out. But yeah, it'll be a pretty active like release year for projects I'm involved in. And a little tour with Sue. And things are going.
Well, we'll check back in at some point in the future and see where you're at in your career. It's been an absolute honor having you on, CJ. Before I let you go, one last question for you. If you could leave our listeners with one piece of advice that you would consider your best piece of advice, what would that be?
Be well-rounded. Every single person I work with is both unbelievably great at what they do, but also nice. Like how you treat each other on a gig, on a tour. Like I don't work with anybody who's not also unbelievably kind and generous and sweet and loving and encouraging and all of that. And you think the best player always wins, but the best player is also really nice and easy to work with. Like I just don't know anybody that's at the top of their game that's seen as that's anything other than lovely to work with. So that's kind of the main thing. And then just be well-rounded, be somebody who knows about cool new records, be interesting, read cool books, read cool movies, be a well-rounded person that's fun at a dinner party. So much of
Back
the
to Mark Gould, right?
No, 100%. Like, there's not I don't work with a lot of boring people, and I don't work with a lot of people who aren't nice. And so those aspects are just as important as the playing, because kind of at a certain point, everybody can play.
Yeah, great advice.
And have a skill set that's unique. I at this point in my life rarely get hired for a gig that someone else could do. Like, if you want to have a career in this, you have to know why you're the right person to call and why you have a skill set that's exactly right for this particular thing. And it's hard to make a living at it if they can just hire a different person and pay them less. You got to have a skill set that is like, well, no, that's the guy. You got to pay him what he wants because he's the guy.
Great advice. I hope you write a book someday.
Yeah.
With all the other stuff projects you're working on, it absolutely, yeah, amazing advice, and yeah, you're living proof of following your passions and all the things you just talked about. So
Thank you very
great
much.
having you on, CJ. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
What an uplifting interview. Thank you, CJ. It's so great to hear that music is alive and well, and folks like CJ are as busy as ever, recording and writing and composing and working on projects. Just goes to show that the work is out there. You just have to be creative. And a lot of the advice that CJ gave in this interview, is a testament to his success. We can learn a whole lot about how to make a living in today's world with AI and Spotify streaming and all those kinds of things that, a lot of us musicians think are doom and gloom. But some of the takeaways when he was working with the band and realized that by learning a new instrument, by learning horn, he could make himself more valuable. Just little things like that, stepping away, kind of a 30,000 foot view of your career and what value you bring to the artists or the groups you play with or work with. So much to learn there, and stuff I wished I learned when I was growing up in music school and trying to work as a professional. No wonder he has won 2 Grammys and probably going to win more in his future the way he's going. Huge thank you to CJ. We'll have links to his website and social media so you can follow along with his career. And talk about serendipity. CJ literally teaches around the corner from the shop at Cal Arts. And he came in about 6 months ago with a student and just started talking. And we hit it off as we were working, trying to find a mouthpiece for one of his students there. And as he's telling me all of this stuff about his career, I was like, we should be recording this. We should be on the podcast. So he literally just fell into our lap here at the shop. So glad I was able to interview him, and we'll certainly follow up with him as his career progresses. We have some great guests, so hit that subscribe button. It's been a few episodes. Hit that 5-star review button. Hit those reviews. I really appreciate it, whether it's on YouTube or if it's on one of the podcast platforms. Help us remain more visible to the brass community. Every year, there's young trumpet and brass players coming up that may not have known about the podcast, and they might see it because you helped feed the algorithm. So thank you very much. Thank you for listening. And until next time, let's go out and make some music.